Episode number 293 with Jeff Ravitz, one of the earliest television, I guess, lighting for televised concert guys that there is out there and was out there, and still doing it today at a very high level, still working with Bruce Springsteen today. We had some great Bruce Springsteen stories, a great Styx story that I didn't know, and I've known Jeff for 20-something years. Just a fantastic talk, and a lovely guy. A lot to be learned from this man. It's why he's always invited to panels and different educational things. He's a smart dude, and he's got a lot of great information. So enjoy episode number 293 with Jeff Ravitz, and please like and share and subscribe. Thank you. Hello, and thanks for joining me again today on Geese of Gear number 293. This episode is brought to you by Main Light, your go-to dry hire rental provider, bringing you the latest in lighting and stage equipment, from moving lights and control consoles to truss LEDs and rugged IP65 rated fixtures built for outdoor venues. They have everything you need to make your productions shine, whether it be a small theater venue, an outdoor stadium event, or a television production set. Main Light is the partner you trust with the gear you want. In addition to rentals, Main Light offered new equipment sales from all of your favorite brands, as well as used sales on equipment pulled directly from their rental inventory. With 4 strategically located facilities in Teterboro, New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware, Nashville, Tennessee, and Las Vegas, Nevada, you get the reach of a national company with the personalized service of a local provider. Visit mainlight.com today to explore their rental options and to request a direct quote through their easy-to-use online ordering platform. And episode number 293 is also brought to you by Elation. Elation Lighting is privately held, established in 1992, and headquartered in Los Angeles, California. All products are developed and engineered in the USA, with sales and support office locations in the US, Mexico, and Europe, and distribution via a worldwide dealer network. Please join me in watching their Pulse Series video.
Inspire your audience's imagination with Elation's Pulse Strobe Series, designed to bolster creativity and deliver breathtaking kinetic intensity. The Pulse Series empowers designers to create dynamic lighting experiences that captivate any audience. The Pulse Series synthesizes mesmerizing lighting experiences with power and precision, allowing designers to create rhythmic, heart-pounding lighting effects with effortless control. Elation's Pulse Series.
Well, although today's guest hardly needs an introduction, I'm going to give him one anyway, and I am going to read his bio, as I usually do, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But I did want to say that I've recently seen him in Las Vegas at LDI, where this gentleman took part in our Dining with Dinosaurs event, and he was one of the big highlights there, of course. And I'm talking about Jeff Ravitz, and I'll get into his bio in just a moment. But first, I wanted to remind you, because I haven't talked about it in a long time, and I'm going to bring up the graphic here too, is Coffee Cult Coffee, who are not officially a sponsor, but they are the Geese of Gear brand of coffee. And I think if you haven't tried it, everyone who's tried it through this podcast has told me, wow, you're right. I drink it every day. It's fantastic coffee, and I pay for it. You can ask Jamie when you contact Coffee Cult to order some. They'll tell you Marcel pays for his coffee. We don't pay him. We don't give him free coffee to talk about it. And the reason that I pay for it is because the money goes to a good cause. So Jamie and I cut a deal on this where this Geezers of Gear, Geezers Grind coffee from Coffee Cult, all of the proceeds go towards Roby Backstage, which then gives that money away to a good cause in our industry, one of our fallen comrades or someone who just needs help, and they determine how that money gets shared. And so, yeah, first of all, try it because it's great coffee, and you get it at coffeecult.com. But secondly, buy it because it does benefit our industry in a very positive way. So I did want to do that quickly. And now we'll go back to Mr. Ravitz. Jeff is a Primetime Emmy winning lighting designer specializing in live entertainment for multi-camera television, concert, tours, and special events. His work includes award shows, comedy specials, concert films, and televised operas, with notable projects like the Olympics medal ceremonies and world tours for Bruce Springsteen, Cher, and Ringo Starr. Co-author of Lighting for Televised Events, Jeff is also the broadcast lighting consultant for Coachella since 2016 and has designed permanent lighting systems for venues, including LA's Microsoft Theater. A global lecturer and recipient of numerous accolades, well-deserved, by the way, including a Sports Emmy and the Parnelli Lighting Designer of the Year Award, Jeff leads his design firm, Intensity Advisors, in Los Angeles. So please welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Jeff Ravitz.
Mr. Ravitz, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Marcel?
Fan-flippin-tastic. I'm very good. It was my mother's 94th birthday yesterday, and she's still alive, and I'm so happy that she's still alive. And she is in a dementia home, but we still have her, and that's great. So yeah, still kind of celebrating because I'm just happy she's there.
And you have some good DNA there.
Well, let's hope. I mean, other than the dementia part, I'm trying to hang on to my brain as long as I can, but yeah, I mean, she's definitely, she's healthy other than that. Like, that's the crazy thing. I have a very good friend of mine who just lost his mother. She just had her 100th birthday, I think at the beginning of December or end of November, I can't remember. And then she died like the day or the 2 days before Christmas at 100. And she was the opposite of my mom. So she had a very sharp mind. Like, her brain, she could tell you everything that's happened in the last 50 years or 100 years. Really smart, really bright. But her body just gave up, and she was 53 pounds when she passed.
Oh, wow.
And my mom's healthy. She eats really well, all of that stuff, but just her mind is gone. So I don't know which is worse. I've been talking to my girlfriend about that. Like, if you had to pick one, which would you pick? And hopefully it's neither.
Right. When you're aware, but you see yourself deteriorating.
Right. Yeah. Or are you better off just not knowing what's going on and
Right.
every day's a happy day,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know the technical term or whatever, but my mom's version of dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever it is, I don't even think they know the difference. But she's happy. Like, generally she's happy. She's not beating up nurses. She's not like doing all the angry things that I've heard of so many friends of mine, parents have gone through. And she's had it for quite some time. And yes, it progresses. So every time it gets a little harder for her to recognize you or to have a conversation or whatever. But she's happy. Like, I started this thing a few years ago where every time I go visit her, I bring a muffin and I sing happy birthday to her. And she's so happy because it's her birthday again, And at first the home kind of gave me shit for it. Like, they said I was being deceptive and that kind of thing. And I said, hey, look, shut up. She likes it. She has fun. And I could sing it again 5 minutes later and she'd go, oh, it's my birthday. Like, she doesn't know. So
Yeah.
why not make her happy for a few minutes,
Exactly. I think it's a good thing that you do. And when you consider that, people spend an entire lifetime paying attention, stressing out, having to, just be on the ball all the time. And then you have a few years where you can just sort of relax and let the clouds pass you by.
Maybe it's a little restful. You're right.
Yeah.
I like to think of it that way, by the way. I like to think of that she's not haunted by her mind, but that she's at peace, that she's like, whoa, look at the birds, and she's in the bathroom or something, like there's no birds.
There's got to be some sort of upside. And some people get angry in
those are the hard
that
ones.
state, and then they're, slaves to that as well. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, just to stay on the health topic for a minute. So I'm a big advocate. Like, there's a doctor that I've followed for years, probably since I turned 50. But his name is Mark Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's he is an expert in functional medicine, which the shortest version would be basically food as medicine. Instead of eating to have fun, you eat to sustain yourself, and that food all has a function. Everything that you eat has a function. And but the general idea is that you want to stay healthy until your last days. So, if somebody could come down a messenger and say, Jeff, you're going to live to 97 and a half years old. Basically at 97 and just before a half, you get a little bit sick and you die, right? As opposed to the last 2 or 3 years or 10 years of your life having dementia or heart disease or cancer or one of those things. That's the ideal scenario. Well, anyways, his company, Function Health, created a test, and I've had a few people in our industry do it. It's $500, and you get 2 sets of tests, and it's blood and urine, and they basically test 110 things or something, as opposed to your usual blood test is 10 or 15 things if you're lucky. And so it's very, very thorough, and from that you get back all these results that tell you, your risk for Alzheimer's, your risk for 1,000 different things. And lo and behold, after all the damage that I've done to myself in the first half of my life, I'm actually in very good shape, and I'm of very good health. And some will hate to hear it, that it looks like I could last a lot longer. And one of the things they give you is your biological age, and mine is 12 years under my real age.
Oh, wow.
So I turned 60 last year, and it says I'm 48. So I like that.
Wow. How amazing.
So my goal is to become 40, And,
can you go backwards?
You can, actually. You can reverse aging. And so that's what a lot of this longevity science is all about. It's not just about slowing aging, but reversing it. And
not emotional age you're talking about.
No, this is physical age. This is biological age. This is how you're emotional age. I think I'm already 12. I don't think I've ever gotten past that, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, it's just something that I'm pretty passionate about. And so it's funny because my girlfriend and I bought each other this set of tests for Christmas, really fun Christmas present. And so she's just doing hers now, and she's very stressed that she's going to end up older than me in biological age. And so, we got a bit of a competition going on. So I think she'll get her results in a few days. She just did the final test today. So
it sounds amazing, but I hope it's not just functional. I hope it's fun eating too.
Well, I think it is, but it takes some time. Like one of the examples he uses is when you can walk up to a Starbucks counter and you're getting your coffee and you look at that food behind the counter and you don't see it as food anymore. Now, you've pretty much passed the test. You've gotten through it, like Fruit Loops aren't food. All that stuff isn't food. And where you crave broccoli as opposed to craving a bowl of Fruit Loops, that's when you've sort of crossed the chasm and gotten into a place where you're eating well. And it's just down to whole foods, like eat a steak. try and make it a grass-fed, and I don't know if you're vegan or something. I'm sorry if you are, but if you eat a steak, make it grass-fed. That's going to be the best of the best, and eat eggs and eat sort of like one ingredient foods. So anyways.
Right.
It's fun.
And it's the preservatives and the processing that, that really gets you. So
that's the worst. And seed oils.
Right.
Seed oils.
But maybe when you hit that 97 and a quarter, maybe you can say, give me a big bowl of Fruit Loops. I just want one more time.
Fuck it. I'm going to start doing cocaine and smoking cigarettes and eating Fruit Loops.
Yeah, it's
that's what I want to do at the end of my life.
80 years without a Fruit Loop. I'm making up for it now.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, when I was a kid, I ate Fruit Loops, and come to find out, because I was in Canada at the time, like there's this, I forget what the food dye is called, number 5 orange or red or something, but it's the really nasty one. And we use it here in the United States in Fruit Loops, but they don't use it in Canada or in Europe in Fruit Loops. So the Fruit Loops, as healthy as they could be, are healthier in Canada and Europe than they are in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of nutty.
Wow. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I eat the healthy diet, so I'm with you.
I'll keep that in mind. He says, okay, great. Are these Canadian Fruit Loops that you're giving me here? Yeah.
I'm a big label reader.
Yes. Are you really?
I am. Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
It's all about those preservatives and processed things you can't pronounce.
Yeah, totally true. I mean, does that sound appetizing? Dexa, blah, 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 like words that are this long. Does that sound good for you? No? Okay, then maybe you shouldn't eat it.
I mean, you can't taste it, so maybe it makes it taste better. At least when you're used to it. When you withdraw from it and you get used to not having it, then you do notice that stuff.
Totally true. Well, and the other thing is, like, we went to we've been living in the same place for like 5 years, and just figured out that right up the road from us, there's a farmer's market that are literally the farmers from this area. I'm in Wellington, where we've got lots of horse farms because it's a horse place here. And, but all the farmers around there bring their stuff and they sell it at this farmer's. It's a proper farmer's market, right? And we bought bread there, and it's like, really nice, really good, healthy. It's not like the modified, whatever, and enriched flour and all that stuff. It's proper stuff. And so we bought that, and it was absolutely amazing. Sourdough bread, absolutely amazing. And like on the second or third day, it was already moldy. And we were like, oh, right, I forgot. Like, real stuff actually goes bad after a short period of time.
Right. The reason that they buy bread every day in France.
Correct, yeah. Well, and that's actually one of the interesting things that I talk with people about a lot is I happen to be a pasta and pizza freak. Like, I could eat either one of those every single day, except physically my body says, hell no.
Yeah.
And... but have you ever noticed, like, when you're in Italy, you can eat bread and pizza and pasta all day, and you don't get that stuffed, bloated, full feeling that you feel like hell here. If you have pizza for lunch and pasta for dinner here in the United States, you're just dying, like me anyways.
Right. Who knows what they put into it?
Yeah, well...
But that stuff wouldn't last 3 days,
Yeah. And, a big part of what it is they use proper, like, ancient grain pasta, and flour is not enriched flour. It doesn't have all the crap added to it. And so it's an interesting thing. Like, unfortunately, as you can hear, it's a rabbit hole that's pretty easy to go down when you start start reading some of these books and stuff. Next thing you know, you're biohacking your health,
Well,
and
it's everything. And, if you do think about it, and if you believe that what, you are what you eat, it's important.
Yeah. It's totally true. So, I saw you at LDI. You were part of our dinosaurs thing, which I think you're far too young to be a dinosaur, Jeff.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And we appreciate you doing that. Soon we're going to actually put together a call to talk to people about doing it again next year. Obviously, much larger, very different. We're going to have a panel. We're going to make it like somebody said something about the fact that it would be much more fun if we could like riff with each other and bust each other's balls and have a good time. And you can only really do that on a panel. It's hard to do when you're at different tables and stuff. So all noted. And what we've heard sort of loud and clear is people want, and you know this because you do it all the time, but people want more access to people like you and to be able to share, take some of your knowledge away and apply it to whatever they're doing. And so it's fun to have another way of doing that, you know?
Maybe, and I know we talked about wanting more young people, students and people that are just launching their careers in there, because that's really what they want to sort of tug at our pants legs and ask us about. That's what we've done. If nothing else, we've been through it, and we might have a thought or two about that for those people. But who knows? Maybe since there's that lunch involved, maybe we spend the first half hour having that one-on-one, having lunch at tables being spread out, and then it's ding, ding, ding. Okay, everyone up, the panelists up onto the stage and get into it as you're discussing.
It might actually be the opposite of that.
Or the opposite.
Yeah, it might be the opposite, because then, by the way, students who are sitting there watching the panel would get a feel for, this Ravitz character is the one I want to go to his table. So, in a sense, you're marketing yourself while you're on the panel. Mm-hmm. And then, but, I'll tell you, one of the challenges is that we are dealing with this corporate thing, the company that owns LDI, and of course, everything they touch has to somehow be profitable, where none of us is doing it for money. We're all doing it to share information. So, I got to get past that machine and make sure that everything works out for them as well. But the idea is to get a lot more students in there. Some of that will be done through corporate sponsorships. Some of it will be done through maybe just LDI saying you can invite, the first 100 people. And then after that, it's got to, it's paid at these different tiers or whatever. And then, you just like you could do the same thing that Parnelli's do, where you get companies to buy tables and then you invite people to fill those seats. So we'll see. We'll come up with a way. But again, I appreciate you being a part of it. It was fun to do.
Yeah, I appreciated being part of it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're always very giving with your time, and in all the notes that you sent me for this podcast, scattered throughout are Jeff speaking at this, teaching at this, sharing information at this, and I love when people not just blowing smoke up your skirt, but I love when people in our industry are willing and able to do those things, because it's super important.
Passing it forward is truly what it's all about, especially in an industry like ours. It's kind of a very specialized industry. It's hard to get real information. We can learn a lot in school, but you learn so much more when you're out in the world of experience. And how else does somebody that's just getting into the business know that? And I like cutting the corners for people. I like, the idea that maybe it's not going to take 5 years or 10 years to acquire a certain amount of knowledge and understanding of what it takes to work your way through the industry, both from a career standpoint as well as like whatever your art or craft might be. And I figure if we, as the more experienced people, can help somebody get from point A to point B that much faster, then our entire industry grows faster.
I agree. Yeah. Well, and also, like, would you agree that there's sort of a disconnect between the old school and the new school ways of doing things? And I think some of that needs to disappear and stay old school, and some of it needs to be pulled forward into the new school way of doing things. And so that's where I see a lot of, just some of the, call it real fundamentals, like showing up on time, just whatever tools you should always have with you. And just a lot of the anecdotes and things that come from people who have done it for a very long time. I love when that information gets shared. Like, Jake Berry is really good at telling people, and don't forget to do this, and always do this. And sometimes it sounds maybe a little bitchy or whatever, but it's true. Like, these are really good values,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that if we take, the old school and the new school, put them into a blender, I think that's, probably
Totally true.
where we want to go. But I mean, people of my generation and Jake's generation, we didn't have that many people really to look up to. We were starting in the business at a time when, production as we know it today was really just ramping up.
Yeah.
Going from nothing to something. And so now here we are as people that can, kind of give a couple of notes to the new people that are just coming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, like back then, one of the things is probably, I don't know if it was the same for you, but if you look at the earliest days of technology, it didn't exist. So a lot of times if you needed something, you actually literally went to a machine shop across the street and said, hey, can you build me one of these things? Because I need this arm to like hold a light over this, set piece or whatever. And, now it's all just there. Like the toolbox is full at this point, right?
Right. No, I mean, I think of really, the pioneers of the equipment in our industry, people like Chip Monk that were just resourceful and said, maybe if we just take an idea from a car headlamp and turn it into a stage light, and how can we do it? And somebody like Bob C, helping to create, the can. And, that's the exciting part. It's almost like, creating mayonnaise, these completely life-changing, industry-changing things that are so small yet so huge.
All of it, like all of the, the multi-pin cable and the like audio. Some of the stuff in audio is even more radical because it needs to be louder. Okay, let me go think about this. And they'd go back into their garage, nail a bunch of things together, put a big fat speaker in it. Maybe if I bend this piece of wood over here, I think that's going to make it push out this way louder or whatever. And, JBL and a lot of the big companies were created like that in somebody's garage, and they just needed a bigger speaker to be able to project the sound a little bit further, as the venues got bigger. And, like you think about the stuff they used for the Beatles at Shea Stadium or whatever, like it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like right now you wouldn't use
the
that.
Little speakers on the ground, pretty much the size of a wedge monitor now.
Right. Well, and the lighting, I mean, you wouldn't use that today in a nightclub or in a somebody's basement for a party,
Well, I've been working for Ringo for over 30 years. And my first meeting with him, he just said, kind of take it easy on me, because the last time I did this, there were just 3 follow spots. So,
that's hilarious.
You understand, it's very easy to burn my head if you're not careful.
That's hilarious. You're still working with him today, right?
I am. I'm very lucky.
He's amazing. I mean, the fact that what is he now? 83, 4, 2?
I think 83.
Yeah. And, touring isn't easy. Even if you're staying in Four Seasons hotels, it's still not easy,
That's right.
There's a lot
That's
to
right.
it. And so for him to still be out there and still doing it and still pulling those huge groups of talented musicians together to do those shows.
Who revere him.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's so amazing. And Paul. I mean, Paul equally, very different, but equally like just so impressive that, and Mick and all of the guys that are in their 80s and let's face it, the 70s weren't easy on people.
That's right. If they made it through till now.
Correct. Yeah. Like, acid was sort of mainstream back then. It was like everybody does.
Yeah,
this,
it was like breakfast.
Breakfast. Exactly. Instead of Fruit Loops, we take acid. And lo and behold, it was probably better for you than Fruit Loops, because
probably,
they're still alive.
Less
so
preservatives anyway.
I'm not advocating for taking acid, children. Please, as you're listening to this, do not listen to anything I'm saying. I'm a shit-talking idiot from Canada. But yeah, so, when I say the disconnect from sort of old school to new school, it's not necessarily even equipment related, because obviously you have many different choices today for equipment that's all so damn good, regardless of who your favorite manufacturer is. And I know for many, many years you were so loyal to Morpheus, and I actually want to get into that when we get into your history a bit. And, let's face it, like if you could compare anyone's technology today to some of the early Morpheus fixtures, at the time they were leading edge, but not so much now. And so the fact that you were creating shows with that technology versus today's technology, very different sort of mindset and skill set and all of that stuff.
Yes, yes. I mean, the only thing I'll say about that old technology is that the leap it took from its predecessor, which was the Leica and the Par, was a much bigger leap than I think we're making now, smaller incremental leaps. Not that I discount any of the great advances that we're lucky to have the advantage of today. But I think in those days, they were really going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Yeah, no, I mean,
not 2 seconds,
massive,
2 decades.
massive leaps. But even like things like the color fader and the, just all of those technologies, like it's almost fun being old because you remember when each of those things happened and how incredible it was and how it changed shows and how it changed your ability probably, as a designer, I would guess, like just, wow, now I can do so much more.
Well, clearly,
probably less fixtures.
That's right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Nobody's using less fixtures. That's the thing.
that's the dumb thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we used to have 1,000 par cans just to be bright enough in each of the 4 or 5 major colors.
That's right.
And now we have 1,000 moving lights. Each one of them can do every color you could possibly want, but we still have 1,000 moving lights on shows for some reason.
That's right. Well, bigger is better, more is more. And I guess I subscribe to that theory too. And as we work in really big venues, you like really filling the space and, thinking about things visually in different ways than we did way back then, where, you'd be in a big arena, but really all that was lit was that little postage stamp of a stage.
Right. Yeah.
And now we're lighting the entire arena and putting lights in every nook and cranny to just really make the experience a 360-degree, visual treat.
Well, and plus you're doing television with so many of the shows that you're a part of as well. So you do have to, you do need that audience lighting and stuff, I guess. But when you're pushing to 1,000 moving lights, are you suggesting that that's the designer and not the artist who's wanting bigger and more? And
I guess it's a combination. I certainly know. I realize that it seems like there's a lot of just frou-frou put in, that when you think that you can really light the band with 20 lights, what's all the rest of that stuff doing?
That's true, huh?
But it is, creating that extravaganza feel, and also visually filling things in. Certainly for television, when you think about a multi-camera shoot and there's a camera looking at every imaginable point of view to the stage, some of it's is behind the stage, some of it's from the performer's point of view, looking out at the crowd. You want a background of some sort everywhere so that it's an immersive experience. Everybody in the room becomes part of the show. That might not be the same concept for an opera, but it certainly is for a big rock show, where it just becomes, big celebration. So that's a little bit more justification. Do the acts ask for that? Some people will give you the mandate that I want it to look really huge. In some cases, they want it to be subtle and simple, and you have to find ways to make it look big without so many fixtures. But, I think it's more the designers than it is the bands.
Really? I guess I always just assumed it was the artist's ego, like Beyonce saying, you better make my lighting package look better than that nasty little Taylor Swift, and that was probably the worst Beyonce impression ever, but you know what I mean? Like I always just assumed it was the artist's ego just saying that theirs was this big, I want this big.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm down to just a few touring acts at this point in my career, and that's not the mandate they give me. They pretty much let me do what I need to do, and I'll show them what I have in mind periodically in the design development phase. But I haven't really. Certainly, somebody like Bruce Springsteen doesn't say, I want it to be bigger than anything the world has ever seen or bigger than the Stones. That's not his MO at all. But I think he knows that we're going to come through with a show that's, equal in magnitude to the performance that he's giving.
Yeah. He doesn't want to look small.
Right.
Yeah. No,
And I don't think
completely
he thinks
get
about it until he sees it. That's one thing about that particular artist. He has to know what he likes.
Does Bruce get involved in that process? Like, does he sit with you and say, what if we could do this instead? Or what about this? Or is he?
Over the years, and it's been over 40 years for me now.
Yeah. That's wild, by the way. Congratulations. What an unbelievable ride,
I'm very, very fortunate. And, when you work for somebody that long, you kind of get into their head and know what they like. So I would say in the last several years, there's been less pre-production exchange of ideas with us.
He just trusts you.
But he's also done some crazy smaller projects over the years. The Seeger Session show, that was a real departure from anything he had done. And the few times that he's done solo acoustic shows, that's where I've really gotten into, one-on-one early discussions. But it's been many years since we've done anything like that. And, there were ideas that he would toss out, things he would ask for. We would do those things and then he wouldn't like them. Artists have to develop their own vocabulary too, to speak to the designer. And sometimes they ask for something and it's totally misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And so it's a dance to get that done. But no, I'd say in the last, 15, 20 years, he and I have had very, very few pre-production exchanges other than him seeing drawings that management presents to him.
Well, that's because it's you, like, I mean, if it were some young unknown designer or something, he'd probably be a heck of a lot more involved, but he trusts you. Obviously you've earned trust over that many years. Yeah. So is there any sign of him stopping? I mean, obviously he's going to have to at some point. We all do.
I guess, he was interviewed last year. And they did a documentary about the assembly of the most recent tour.
Yeah.
And it's still in progress, even though they're off for a couple of months.
Wow.
And they said, so Bruce, when do you think you're going to hang it up? And he said, I'm not stopping until the wheels come off.
Well, that's not going to happen.
Now, he's got a lot of options. Whether he could continue to do E Street Band tours where, it's conducive to being on a stadium stage where he is jumping off the stage and running on the ego ramp all the way to one side of the stadium and all the way to the other and out on, I don't know how long he'll be able to do that. He's still doing it, but
that's what helps.
I know. But at the end of this tour, which more or less, may end at the end of 2025, with scattered dates. I don't think they're going to be hitting the road as solidly as they did the last couple of years, but they've got some makeup shows to do and they've filled in and they may just get inspired to do a little bit more. Who knows? He's going to keep going at this pace, and then he can do solo acoustic. He can do Broadway. He can put together like an R&B band because he's gotten into R&B in a big way in the last few years.
Interesting.
So he can do things that are less physically demanding, maybe even less vocally demanding because, an E Street Band show, he does a lot of, singing and screaming at the top of his lungs. And that's part of the appeal and part of his, personality. But you do something like a solo acoustic, he's barely even on the mic,
Yeah.
He shows some subtlety when he does that. And I think that would be something that would appeal to him. So anyway, long answer.
But the rest of the E Street Band, they hold up pretty well, like Van Zandt and like, are the rest of them, they're doing okay too? Because they're all getting up there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're all aging. Yeah.
I had a discussion with Max Weinberg, the drummer, last year. And we were just kind of talking about, our lives, and we kind of got back together after not seeing each other for a couple of years. And, he's saying, that, drumming is, perhaps the most physically demanding job in the band.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I've learned how to, play harder without working harder, and a guy like that, he's spent so many years, at the kit. He knows how he can get the sound he wants without, working every muscle in his body to, 100%.
Right.
That's kind of what it's all about. I mean, I think even, tennis players, how to do that. Everyone, figures that out at some point.
Yeah.
The young ones are always the
preservation.
Ones like, man, you don't have to put 300% of yourself into it if you know what you're doing.
Well, it's similar to athletes. Like, I don't know if you're a tennis fan, but everyone always said Nadal was going to, there's no way this guy's going to even make it to his 30s. But he changed his tennis style as he got into his 20s and especially into his late 20s and early 30s. And eventually he did have to retire. But he was a crazy, 17-year-old. Like, he got every ball that he wasn't supposed to get and stuff like that. But I remember, McEnroe and others would always say, this guy ain't going to last. He needs to let some of those go by him, because he's killing himself going after some of these balls.
Yeah.
And similar thing, you got to start thinking longevity and sustenance. How can I keep this thing going as long as possible?
Right. Right. I did see his last match on TV. And it was the same thing. He was running after every ball, going for it, as hard as he could. And so,
What about Djokovic?
That somebody like Federer, who doesn't seem to exert nearly, the energy.
No, he seems like he's putting no effort into it.
Yeah.
But Djokovic, to me, is a phenom. Like, this is a guy that could possibly play till friggin' 50 years old,
Yeah.
He'll find a way because he's so in charge of his physical body and his strength and his fitness and all of those things. He's just got such a better, understanding of what he's capable of than anybody else does. And, I hated when they booed him when he exited the Aussie Open. Because that's a guy that's super authentic. Like, he's not leaving because he's down on the scorecard or something. He's leaving because he knows his body and he can't keep going. So that's why he walked away. I've seen him come back way too many times from 2 sets down. He's not going to quit. He's just not that guy.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah. I remember that.
Who? So you said 3 artists that you're still working with. Who are the other 2? Not Styx, right?
No, actually, it's only 2.
Okay.
I'm not really involved with Styx anymore.
Okay.
And that was almost a 50-year relationship.
Yeah, I know that was a long one too.
But it was just time for me to, Libby Gray, who was our tour lighting director for many years, had taken the show to a really good place in my absence. They're in other parts of the world, and with her improvising and taking, the bones of what had been created before, really turned it into something of her own. And so it was time for me to step back and let her do that. But I'm still involved with Ringo, and kind of in the same way. I design the show. I'm, maybe a creative consultant. I do the plot, and but there are some really talented.
Yeah, you don't tour with it.
I don't tour with it. Greg Klassen is out now. Susan Rose was with it for 15 or 20 years. She did a great job. And both of those lighting directors really take it so much further on a day-to-day basis when they have to improvise, use local equipment, and that doesn't really match up to the original plot. So But I am still involved, with Ringo and then Bruce. So I'm really not out there looking for touring work at the moment.
No, I mean, it's funny because there's so many people that I talk to. Obviously, my podcast is called Geezers of Gear, but there's so many people I talk to whose artists are getting close to aging out. And I always ask those questions like, okay, so you out looking for 25-year-old artists, to replace them? Or are you going to phase your career into a different stage when those artists phase out? And you get a different bunch of answers, obviously. For everyone, it's a different, life plan or whatever you want to call it, a strategy that says, I'm going to go spend more time doing whatever, learning how to water ski. Or whatever it is, I don't know. But
I was always interested in so many different things. And there was something about, being on the road and touring that I felt, for me anyway, was sort of a self-limiting scenario. And as I toured less, and even though I was given the privilege of designing these shows, rehearsing them, and then exiting, the tour, that gave me the opportunity to get into some different things. And I thought, well, maybe something like architectural lighting would give me the opportunity to travel less and use my brain in a different way. And I did that for a number of years. It wasn't really, something that I enjoyed all that much. But TV had been something that had always sort of ran an undercurrent throughout my career, because it was there early on when I first began is when MTV suddenly, arrived on the scene, and everybody had to have a music video, and teams of video people would come in and shoot a live show or take the band into a studio and do some sort of like semi-scripted thing. And I would sort of watch that with great interest. And I thought, later on, fast forward many, many years, I thought, well, television is something that I could probably grow older more gracefully in, because, it's a field where, they value the experience, and there are a lot of, older people, 50 plus people in it. Whereas the touring industry, they are, recruiting from the cradle.
Yeah, it's a young man's game right now, or
colleges.
Young people's game. I shouldn't say man, because there's a lot of, fortunately, I mean, I think it's a really great thing. I'm not a big DEI guy, but I love that more women are coming into our industry, and young girls and stuff. I think it's good for them, and it's good for the industry. It's a great career.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I do think that it's a younger person's game, and when you've got younger acts who are the ones that are really, charting highest, they want, people that they can relate to. Those artists want somebody that's more or less in their age group, and somebody who is attuned to all of that music, probably liking that music better.
Yeah. Although it's funny, because I recently had Marty Hom on the podcast again, and we were talking about that, and he's not what I would call that new generation young person or anything, but he's got Olivia Rodrigo, he's got a few young artists and that are very hot, and so. I don't know. I think,
well, as a tour manager,
he's not designing for them. He's the tour manager.
As a tour manager, you sort of want, the
experience.
Adult in the room.
Yeah, that's true too.
Good
point.
So, I mean, I agree. Now, I have the advantage of working at Coachella every year.
Yeah.
And that gives me an opportunity to plug into a lot of artists that I wouldn't be paying that much attention to otherwise. And so I get like a full master's degree in new music every year.
Yeah. So what is your, what's your basic, in a nutshell, responsibility with Coachella?
Well, I'm there as the broadcast lighting consultant.
Okay.
For whatever that's worth. And how much I really accomplish is anybody's guess. Most of the headline acts come in with what I'm supposed to do is help all of these acts understand that we are showing this streaming around the world, 80 million plus hits every year and growing annually. And just to understand that it's important that those people that can only see the show on their computer screen or their phone or whatever need something to look at that is friendly to the camera. That doesn't mean blow it out, make it look like the 11 o'clock news. No, the headliners on the big stages really understand that before we even begin. And the only thing I really have to remind them of is levels. We don't really care about weird color and things like that. We're not trying to necessarily make everybody look that pretty, unless they want to be. I would assume that if you're Beyonce's lighting designer or Taylor Swift's or Lady Gaga's, you're going to do your best to make them look really good anyway. What they need to understand is sometimes levels can get way very uneven, and I can help them smooth those sorts of things out. It's the smaller tents. So, Coachella has a couple of big headline stages, and then they've got the smaller tents where the new acts and the indie acts and the acts that are just almost ready to burst onto the headline stage are playing. And a lot of those acts say, my artist wants no light on them. And so when you look at a smaller lighting system of maybe 100 lights, none of them are aimed at the stage. It's all out, at the crowd.
Yeah.
That part looks good. And I say, look, if you could just devote 10 lights, that one, onto your artist. And it doesn't have to be even lighting, and it just needs to be some level of illumination.
You need to see the artist.
Yes. There are people out there that would like to see your lead singer, or they'd like to see your guitarist, et cetera, et cetera. If I can do that, if I can take it from 0 to 4, on a 0 to 10 scale, I feel like I've accomplished a lot.
Interesting. Yeah. It's funny because I can't remember who it was. Somebody on my podcast said it to me one time where he said, I'm designing a show for 20,000 people right here, but like 2 million people that are going to be viewing it on a 4 or 5 inch screen. And I'm very thoughtful about that. So he's actually designing it. And as he's looking at the show, he'll look at it on his iPhone or whatever as well, because, by the time the show ends, there's going to be 10,000 of those videos that are uploaded to YouTube or whatever. And so many people are going to see it, so many more than those in the audience. And so why wouldn't we give it some thought even at that level? But then you talk about a Coachella. So, I think it's really wise that they have you there. And my guess is that you're just trying to get them to be at least thinking about that, if nothing else. Just think about the fact that there's more people seeing it on a phone than are seeing it in front of that, B or C or D stage that you're on right now.
That's exactly right. The live audience is perfectly okay with the big, broad picture. And with the ambience in the room, they can probably see what's going on stage anyway. There's a lot of video. There's just a lot of bounce light. But that doesn't work for the cameras. So it is those people that are just watching on their phone. And so it's gratifying if I can bring it up a couple of notches. I hate to make it seem like my bar is set so low that if I take it from 0 to 4, that's sufficient. But believe me, that's a good day.
Yeah. I'm sure it's really complicated, because again, everybody has, their set of goals. And then I think when you have a lighting designer for some small up and coming act or whatever, and then you have this other lighting designer who's coming in and saying, hey, we want to make sure that, his back's going to go up a little bit, right? Like, you can't come in here and tell me what to do.
I've been sent on my way many times.
Yeah. Well, you're not the most physically, frightening dude either. So if you're coming out to my front of house location and telling me what to do, I'm not sure that you're going to scare me much.
Yeah.
Jeff.
It's like, who's talking? Oh, you?
Oh, there he is. That guy. That's funny. So are you serious in saying that the television thing was just kind of like a almost accident, like where you just went, well, this MTV thing's getting kind of popular. Like, these people are going to need somebody who knows how to light these things, and maybe I should do that.
It was a little bit of that. I was intrigued by it as well. For one thing, I was intrigued by the fact that it wasn't as easy as it looked. I
Yeah.
thought that, what they would do would be bring in some big 10Ks and just flood the stage, and that would be that. And that's not what they did at all. They came in and they made it, by and large, they made it look, fairly interesting and did change a lot of my levels. And I thought, wait a minute, there's more to this than I realized. And then the light bulb went off, and I realized it's so much about the close-up, because 90% of the shots are more or less some kind of a close-up or a two-shot, and it's not easy to make those shots look good and make people look, decent, and that little smear of color that looks so good to the live audience looks a little weird when it's out of context, and that's all you're seeing, and you're seeing somebody with a big smear of orange or blue on their face. It doesn't make as much sense. How can you do that same thing and sort of impart that color statement, but not make it look so strange to the people that are watching on their TV? So I did get intrigued by it, but I also saw it as the future. I saw it as, a different way, to operate. And I liked the precision of it. For some reason, there was something about the mechanics of how light and the camera and the iris of the camera work that I enjoyed. And then I partnered up with Jim Moody.
Well, that didn't hurt.
That didn't hurt, and he had a lot to say and a lot to share with me. And just really, I developed kind of a love for the art form. How could I make those shows look as good as possible on camera without robbing the live audience of the experience also?
And that was early 90s, I think, right?
Yeah. I mean, it started in the 80s. And the other thing about it was that I resented the fact that the video crews would come in and they'd sort of push me aside and try to relight my show. And so I thought, well, I want to learn more about this so that I'm valuable to them and they won't feel so compelled to get me out of their way.
Right.
And then by the 90s is when it really started to take hold. And then in the 90s is when I partnered up with Jim and really started seeing the stuff he was doing and befriended people like Bill Klages and Bob Dickinson and watched what they did and saw how artfully they did what they were doing. And I thought, okay, this appeals to me.
Yeah. And I know I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Really specifically, like live music and sports and stuff like that, not television or film or any of that kind of lighting, right?
Yeah, I wasn't really equipped to go into film. I suppose I could have tried to become a cinematographer, but that really wasn't on my plate because I was so firmly involved in the live entertainment industry, and I saw that there was this whole thing about live entertainment being shot for TV that was an enormous market, and there were all of these people there that didn't understand it.
Yeah.
They didn't understand what that transition was going to be, and these other consultants and so-called experts had to come in and help. And I thought, okay, I can be that person. So when I age out of the touring industry, that's something that I can do. Plus, I find it really interesting. Yeah. Other than the one-on-one friction that I might have dealing with, an LD whose show I was adapting. And so I thought, I was a recipient of that for so many years. I should know psychologically how to approach these people. And that's what I did. I tried to create some sort of a bedside manner that wasn't so off-putting.
Yeah, I know that I've been witness to some of the situations where, somebody's got a tour out and then Branton or you or someone is brought in to light it for an HBO special. And you see some of the discussions, let's call it, that are not always extremely productive. But I think by this point, we've all gotten pretty used to it because of all the streaming and all the different things that go on now. Like, I think more shows are shot for television than are not at this point,
or shot for some type of a device anyways.
Plus iMag.
Yeah, iMag, yeah, of course. Have digital cameras made it so much easier now?
Well, I mean, for sure. There was a time when the cameras were so much less forgiving for light levels and color, and certain colors were, you were taught, like the first lesson you learned when you were getting into television was no red, because cameras couldn't register red. Now they can. And, there's so much more. And now, of course, you can go down to super low light levels, which you wouldn't do for a concert necessarily where there's a live audience, but you might do for a show that's on a soundstage where you're not worried about the audience. And there's so many advantages to working at lower light levels. That the cameras allow you to do that. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. What about video though? Like all the LED screens that everyone has, is that a real problem when it comes to shooting it for television? Yeah.
Oh,
because
yeah.
It just seems like a brightness war. Like you're going to go that bright, we're going to do this, and everything, the levels just keep getting higher and higher, and we're getting lights that are now 60, 70,000 lumens on these rigs, and it's like, what for? Like, when did we ever decide that it needed to be bright as the sun?
Right. Well, and whoever has their hand on the dial wants their toy to be the biggest,
I guess, right. Yeah, well said.
Ever.
Yeah, that's true.
But truly, there was a time when the screens needed to be brighter just to register properly. If you took it down to the level that, the lighting people wanted, it would start to flicker and lose quality. Now the screens can go down to much, much lower levels. But the problem is the brightness. I mean, you can never get anybody on stage bright enough with the stage lighting to match what those screens are putting out right in your face.
Yeah.
On the face, on is like reflective. The screen is direct light right into the eye and right into the camera. So there's that. And then that's
got to be difficult. That's tough, because I mean it's even hard when you're trying to take a selfie or something, just to light your face enough with an LED screen behind you that's just blasting forward or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's like it being in front of a window.
Yeah, of course.
And trying to take a picture, and somehow your face gets really dark and the window looks great.
Right.
So there's that, and then the color is usually way off. And for instance, a situation like Coachella, where they spend the entire first half of the show day in daylight, and so of course the screens have to be bright, and they're usually matched to daylight. As you get closer to nighttime, and then completely, nighttime, those screens need to come way down because the stage lights just can't compete. And so it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say battle, because the technicians are all starting to understand what the objective is, but it is a coordination, and it is a little bit of a waltz.
Or a battle.
Yes.
It was a bit of a battle.
Yes.
I think I called it a war, so I was even less diplomatic. But yeah, I can see that being problematic. And
add light to the stage too. I mean, somebody that's standing next to a screen is getting all this weird color and brightness on them that doesn't necessarily look that good.
Yeah. I if you've ever listened to my podcast, I usually start out with how'd you start? And honestly, I don't even know the answer to that, even as long as I've known you and you've been on the podcast, but you were part of a group of people. But did you go to theater school, or did you?
Yeah. I grew up just outside New York City, the New Jersey part of New York.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to some Broadway shows when I was young. Dad took me to some shows, and I really kind of got into that and theater, and always kind of pursued that throughout school. So I thought I was going to the theater. There was no rock and roll in those days, or it would have been television or film, which really I didn't see my way into. And I love the idea of, the connection between the show and the live audience. It was something that even as a kid, that intrigued me. So I did go to college for theater, where you study everything and do everything. So, and that's good. You learn your craft from both sides of the stage. When I got out,
you studied acting as well.
I studied acting. I mean, I saw that as a potential path. I've got to say, where I grew up, there wasn't much exposure to stuff like lighting and the tech side. Acting or directing seemed to be what you would do. And when I got to college, I suddenly realized that there were a lot of people that were studying the technical side. And as it turned out, my college roommate was really into lighting and got me to take some classes, and I just gobbled it up and really connected to it. So when I got out of school, I actually did act for a couple of years, but I was also lighting. Simultaneously, I just take whatever I could to pay the bills, and at one point it just sort of flipped because I had been a musician in high school. I played keyboards in a rock band that I, had with my friends, and we had a little bit of local success. So I always missed that, and I just put it totally aside when I went to college. But one day, shortly after I graduated, I saw an ad for in one of the arts magazines in Chicago, because I went to school in Chicago. And they were looking for a lighting director for Nashville Recording Group. So I thought, okay, called the number, had an interview, got the job because I was one of the few people that had any lighting experience. There were all kinds of people applying for the job, but none of them had any experience. We're talking about the early 70s, where everybody just wanted to, join the circus or join a rock band.
It's just wild, though, that they'd advertise for a lighting guy in the local, newspaper or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
hilarious. How hard up were they?
Yeah, no kidding. That's hilarious. And you just happened to see it.
I just happened to see it.
Destiny.
I had seen a Grateful Dead show in Chicago about a week before. And it was one of the first shows that had real production. And I think Candace Brightman was probably there, but I certainly didn't know her.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she was there. We talked about it when I met her years later. And it was all licos and pars and beams and haze and, kinds of things that production turned into. But it was one of the few shows that really was carrying that level of production. And it was everything that I had learned in theater school you weren't supposed to do. The lighting was supposed to be invisible. Maybe you were creating a thunder and lightning effect, but aside from that, you were supposed to be realistic, unless you were doing some sort of abstract show that required
that stuff was on display and part of the show, basically. Yeah,
right.
That's interesting.
Right.
I've never heard it described like that, but it's so true.
And all this lighting that was really tangible, you could reach out and touch it. And I thought, wow, that breaks every rule I've ever been taught, but I like it. Yeah, so there I was just maybe 7 days later, and I saw this ad and I thought, okay, let's give it a try. And, like 2 weeks later, I was in a nightclub lighting a band and taking it and going around playing colleges and opening for bigger bands where I kind of saw what the early level of production was, trees and, no trusses yet, pre-truss.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, even that
That's
Grateful
incredible.
Dead show that I saw, they had scaffolds, but they didn't have truss.
Wow. That's amazing.
And
that band wasn't Styx, was it?
That wasn't Styx, but
No.
they were in Chicago too. So I was working for this band, and we opened for Styx, and I got to know them, and so that was sort of my entree to them. Yeah. So I mean, they needed someone, and I was one of the few local LDs in Chicago that understood the vibe and the art form of rock and roll. at that point, I'd had a year or two into it, and so I got the
You're a
invitation.
crusty old veteran now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In those terms.
That's wild.
So that's how it all began, and it was really one thing led to another. But Styx was really good for me because they really skyrocketed to fame. I mean, it was a time in history where they were considered that prog rock. A lot of people thought they were British just because of the style of music and the sound of the lead singer's voice. But they weren't. They were just from Chicago. But we did some really theatrical things. And when they said, well, we're doing a new tour and we're about to release a new album, what do you want to do? I would always throw backdrops in and scrims and all these theatrical techniques that I knew were fun, and they were willing to spend a little bit of money. And then we would, I don't want to say I choreographed the show, but there were times when I would say, if you guys on this particular guitar moment where everything stops and it's just you two guys playing a guitar riff, if you guys would stand like back to back over here, I could have this light on you. And then
very dramatic effect. Yeah.
All that kind of thing, you know, when it was really simple to do. And so little by little, we kind of had this, theatrical repertoire growing.
So was the first band that you went out with, the club band, was that your first paid gig or?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then don't tell me Styx was your second.
Well, I had worked around Chicago for some other small bands. And then I had gone out on the road with the Corones.
Oh, really?
They invited me to go out on a Kiss tour, and it was Kiss's first big arena tour. It was right after the Kiss Alive album came out. I Want to Rock and Roll.
Was that Cheap Trick opening?
Everybody opened for them, so
I'm just trying to, because I remember I saw Kiss when I had to be 12 years old or something the first time I saw Kiss.
Oh, what are you doing to me?
And it was in the Calgary Corral, the old hockey arena in Calgary. And it was for me, it was life-changing. Like, it just changed everything I believed about music and shows and all that kind of stuff. I was in bands at the time, but that was
everything.
Was
yeah,
it was
rock
everything.
And roll, theatricality.
Well, and just spitting blood and lighting things on fire and stuff. I was hooked. That I was so into Kiss at that point. It was like, wow, this is so amazing.
I didn't know what to expect. I was not aware of them at all. I went out on the first show. And I remember being in the back of the house, and we were playing some theater in Buffalo or someplace, and they were testing out the flamethrowers. They had these big flame pots, which happened to be, they bought them from the original Wizard of Oz production, where, if you remember, when the wizard is first seen, there are these flames that are shooting up around him. They bought those devices from that production. And
that's an interesting story.
Because it wasn't something that was like around that you could just buy.
Yeah.
There was no city.
Well, and nobody was using that stuff
like
yet
that
back then. In live shows, it was obviously, they were one of the first big real show bands like that. If not the first, I don't know.
Oh,
I guess the Dolls.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I felt this heat on the back of my neck. I was setting up a console out front, and I turned around and I see these flames, and I went, okay, this is going to be different.
Yeah. But and then you see these 7-foot tall guys in high heels and crazy outfits, and you're like, what? What were you telling your parents about all this stuff? Because, I mean, you're a fairly young Jewish kid, from New Jersey. Your parents had to be going, Jeff, now what are you doing?
No, I got to say they found it kind of interesting. I mean,
really?
They already knew I was off the deep end when I went to theater school.
I
know. Thank goodness. They were really supportive.
That's awesome.
Found it interesting, crazy, fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
I wasn't getting myself into trouble. So
yeah. Were they able to get out to any like Springsteen shows or anything along the way, or
Ringo,
they went to
all of them?
Did they? Good.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's so much fun when you're able to share your work with your parents like that.
Yeah. So I've got to say they were happy for me, and so
cool. Although if they would have seen Kiss, they might have been like, Jeff?
Yeah, they never did see Kiss.
Yeah, we should have a talk here, Jeff. Yeah. That's wild. And so that was your first time that you actually went on tour, was with the Carones and the Carones being upstaging, of course, or eventually, I don't know if they were upstaging yet, but
they were. They were.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I met Robert Carone at a show that my original club act was performing at. And so he was standing back there because upstaging had provided the gear. And we just got to talking and kind of exchanged numbers. And the next thing I know, he had actually called me to do a couple of small shows with him. It was literally me and Robert Carone in a U-Haul or Ryder truck, taking a bunch of car cans out of his garage or renting them from one of the local vendors in town to get what he didn't have. And the two of us driving somewhere like Wisconsin and doing a show for a day. So I had done that for a while. Robert
That's
Carone.
Wild. That is wild.
And
did you go to their party this year
I did.
LDI? Yeah,
I did.
I think I saw you there. I can't remember. I think I had about 12 glasses of wine by then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There was some good wine.
Yeah, the wine is always good at that party. It's crazy. But I had a really nice. So it was kind of a funny moment because I saw Seth kind of Houdini out the door, and I was super tired because I can't change time anymore. So I've been getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas, or 4 in the morning every morning, right?
Yeah.
And so I was dead tired, and it's like, I don't know, 9 o'clock or something. And Sarah was with me, and I said, Sarah, let's Houdini, let's pull out. I'm just going to wait for the right moment. And I see Seth duck out the door. And so I go, oh, Seth, like I wanted to talk to him. And now I'm out the door, into the restaurant part. And I'm like, ha. And he goes, whoa, something up? And I go, no. I was just using you because you just left. So I'm using you. So then I'm on my way physically, like to go up the stairs to get out of there. And I run into Robert. He must have been coming back from the bathroom or wherever he was. And I ended up in probably, I don't know, a 30-40 minute talk with Robert. We just had this very cool, very long, nice talk. I love that guy.
Yeah.
They're such nice people. They
Yeah,
really
truly, and deserve all their success.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. And they do have a lot of success.
Yes.
They got some success. So then
I had them
Styx.
to thank for getting me in the door. So they called me for Kiss, met a bunch of bands, and all of their tour managers and so forth, doing that. And Styx actually opened for Kiss several times. And I remember one
It's
night.
a weird fit.
It was actually pretty good.
Really?
Styx
I mean,
got
both great
them-
bands, but
And it was earlier in Styx's career also. It was pre-Tommy Shaw.
Yeah.
If you know anything about them, Tommy had joined them in like 76.
Right. Yeah.
And gave an interesting shot in the arm, a really good, to the band. So Styx got the band, the crowd really revved up. So they were a good opening act for yes. People were
that was like
prominent.
Lorelei and Light Up and all that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
I got so into Styx when I heard that. Like I heard Lorelei and Light Up, and I don't remember if there were other songs on that album, but I was just like, wow, this band is incredible.
In Canada too.
Yeah, they were huge, and I flipped out when I heard that. I was like, this is the coolest band I've ever heard. And so yeah, that's cool. And
So-
Tommy Shaw is one of those guys that I have such a high degree of appreciation for, because he is still doing it and not mailing it in. Like he's like Steven Tyler, but Steven Tyler can't quite hold it together completely, but sounds good, looks like a rock star, does the songs as well as he ever did. He's amazing, that guy. He just
I totally agree.
doesn't seem to age, He's amazing.
And the rapport with the audience, I think, is better than ever.
Yeah. So good.
Somehow they've managed to just get better over the years.
Yeah, I mean, even when I see people uploading iPhone videos or whatever, and I'll watch them do whatever it is, and I'm just like, man, he's still so good. Like, he sounds incredible at whatever age he is now. And, you know, God bless him. And Lawrence Gowan's a funny one, because I knew Gowan personally in Canada when he was Gowan. And you know, he got a little big in Canada, but nowhere near as big as Styx, obviously. So that's been an incredible ride for him as well.
Absolutely. And he's been good for them.
Oh, amazing. Like, he was such a good fit for what they needed. You know, they needed a showman. They needed a good singer who could do those parts that Dennis did. And they needed a great keyboard player, and he just really fit the bill. Yeah. He's very, very flamboyant. Not flamboyant might be the wrong word, but he is kind of flamboyant. He's a showman, you know?
In a good way. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Physically great on stage.
Yeah. No, he's fantastic. They, God bless them, man. The longevity that band has pulled out, and they just keep packaging them with Journey or with REO Speedwagon or with all of those bands from the same basic era.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going. The train keeps on a rolling. They were just here in South Florida recently. I got invited and I didn't go, but yeah. Yeah, but that's cool.
Great.
So what did that lead? So by this point, do you know that this is the career I want? I want to be a touring lighting guy, or
Yeah, absolutely. At that point, there was no question in my mind. I still had.
Were you ever on a crew? Like, did you ever have to be a lighting tech or anything, or did you just go straight to lighting director, lighting designer?
No, actually, when I did Kiss, I was on the crew. And that was good. That was really good for me, because that was a bigger show than I had ever been involved with on Styx. They hadn't done anything quite like that. So I got to see how all of that worked, and just live that life and work that schedule. And I got to run the opening acts, so that was always fun. So I got, a little bit of LD chops doing that. So
that's an amazing experience. Yeah, that took off a lot of the pressure of having to learn that stuff on the fly later on, obviously. It's huge value.
Yeah. I mean, I had to learn the terminology and, just literally the route from the dimmers to the light to the console, and figure all that out. So, but I did that for 6 months, and then I left and I went back to Styx. I had left Styx, for, little sabbatical. And no, excuse me, I'm not to get too bogged down in the details. It was that club band. I left the club band, went to Kiss, went back to the club band, and within a month I got the offer from Styx, and so I was gone again. So I had a couple of quick turnarounds.
And the Styx thing lasted, like you said, 50 years.
50 years.
Incredible. That's wild. You made some good choices on artists.
I guess I was in the right place at the right time, and fortunately, I said yes. Now, when I was offered Bruce, I said no initially.
Really?
A lot of people don't know that, but I was with Yes at the time. And I was.
You can't say no to Yes.
Exactly. That's
sure. That was probably the dumbest joke I've ever said.
No, but good. So, and I couldn't see my way to extricating myself from the Yes tour initially, but thought about it for a couple of days and turned around and reaccepted the offer.
Wow.
So,
which Yes tour was that?
It was at 90210.
90210?
Yeah.
Smeaton ended up doing it, didn't he?
Well, after
you left.
Actually, he came in as a programmer, believe it or not.
Ah.
So I was out there with them for about 6 months, and I got the Springsteen offer. So I turned it over to a friend of mine named Merle McLean, who I don't know if you know, but he was a good friend of mine who I thought musically and lighting designer wise, he was perfect for it. And then I had just seen Jonathan's Thompson Twins show. I mean, Jonathan was just really kind of newly out of the box as this, lighting, as this Varilight programmer / designer. And that Thompson Twins tour was really groundbreaking, as small as it was. And he programmed the whole thing and designed it. And so I went to see the show and I said, please, come and program the Vari-Lights for us, which he did. And between me, Merle, and Jonathan, I thought we did, we created a pretty good show. And then I got the heck out of there. I went to Bruce.
Yeah, I saw that show. It was good. Yeah, so you said no because you were with Yes, but you did want, like, by that time Bruce had already taken off, right?
Well, it was pre-Born in the USA.
Oh.
It was just after the River tour, and he hadn't done anything in a few years because he was recording the album and doing some other things. So I didn't feel inclined initially to leave the Yes tour, but I thought about it and discussed it with some friends and thought, well, that's an insane decision on my part. So I quickly backtracked and accepted the offer. And on that show, Born in the USA, of course, turned out to be Bruce's most successful album. He went from star to mega superstar on that tour,
right?
We were all there. It was a 2-year tour, hitting the entire world, and just had a ball doing it.
And it still hasn't ended. That tour still hasn't ended. He's still touring. Price of tickets has gone from like $5 to $5,000, but aside from that, it's all pretty much the same.
Crazy that on the Born in the USA tour, that was just when the Jacksons Victory Tour was out as well, and we all were invited to the Victory Tour, but they said, but you have to buy your ticket. So it was a $75 ticket. This is 1984. The best seat in the house for Bruce was $18.75.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's wild. $75 for the Victory Tour.
Yeah.
And you had to pay. Did you pay?
We were supposed to pay, and somehow I never did. I think the tour manager must have bought us all tickets.
Somebody's going to be coming looking, going, hey, $75.
Yeah.
Plus interest, plus fees.
Yeah.
$5,000. Yeah. Oh, my God. Bruce... Okay, so the artists, I guess, are somewhat responsible for ticket prices, but the whole dynamic pricing thing gets a lot of artists in trouble. And, again, I think it's one of those situations where things are done maybe for the right reason, and then it spins out of control and it becomes all wrong and all bad and everything else. But you got to do something, because what's happening is if Bruce is selling tickets for $300, call it, none of them end up in the hands of fans at that price. They're all bought up by resellers, and then they're sold again on the secondary markets, and they become $5,000 anyways. And now Bruce isn't making any of the money. The promoter's not making any of the money. Certainly Jeff Ravitz isn't making any of that money. Right. And you know what I mean? So, like, why shouldn't the artist at least get a piece of the fans that are willing to pay $5,000? Why shouldn't you get a piece of that? So I see some common sense to it. I see some logic to it. And guess what? People could say, but he's greedy. Well, people don't do things because they don't want to make any money usually. Like, generally, there's going to be a commercial side of everything we do, right? We all want to be able to survive and, God forbid, be able to afford, a vacation or a meal every once in a while, like.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, and I'm not defending the whole dynamic pricing thing, but Bruce did put out a statement saying anybody that doesn't feel like they got their money's worth may go to the box office and get a full refund for whatever you paid. And I guess to date, there's been none of that.
Refunds, yeah. Well, because probably half those $5,000 tickets are reselling for 10. Because there's so much friggin' available cash out there right now that people, if they want to go see Bruce and they want good seats, what's the price that they won't pay? You know what I mean?
That's
like,
right.
I just saw what's his name, Hendrick, the guy Rick Hendrick. He owns a bunch of car dealerships. I just saw on one of these auctions, I think it was the Mecum auction, he paid like $3.5 million for the first 2025 Corvette ZR1 that's coming off the line, like it's serial number 001. He paid $3.5 million for it. I mean, This is a Corvette that will sell for about $175,000 in the dealership, but you want serial number 001? Guess what? And when I saw it going up over $2 million, I was like, you got to be shitting me. It's a Corvette.
It's worth whatever anybody will pay for it.
Correct. And the problem with tickets is that when you're talking about Bruce Springsteen or Taylor Swift, name the price, because you're going to find people and so you have to adjust to the market. You have to.
Yes. I just, from the consumer's point of view, when you look at the website and there's a ticket for $800 and then you look 5 minutes later and it's $2,000, then you really feel kind of ripped off.
Yeah. I completely get it. I get it from both sides, though, because, again, the problem is that rich guy who wants to go see Bruce Springsteen is going to pay $5,000. He'll pay it from some seedy scalper somewhere. The tickets, pass through several sets of hands or whatever. Why shouldn't that be a controlled situation where, the money is going back to the artist and to the promoter, the people who actually paid the money and put in the effort to put this show on and everything else versus the scalper? So I don't know. It's a problem that's as old as concerts, the scalper situation.
But I get it. And actually the way you phrase it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's something no one's ever said to me once. Marcel, you just said something that really makes sense.
Let this date in history show.
Exactly. Well, it's recorded. This is a good thing. So now it's there in forever, I'm in Foreversville having made sense. So Styx, Bruce Springsteen, and so that just lasted a few years, like where you were just touring and being real happy and everything, and then you discover this MTV thing. And
well, so that's when I thought there really is a way to make at least a lateral move, if not an upward move into this field. And I was always interested in that field, never thought that I would be able to find my way into it, didn't really understand it. And once I started to get a feel for what it took, and there would be years off sometimes between Springsteen tours, and I would either fill it in with some other tours, or I would start to find, through Jim Moody and from some other friends, start to find some television work. I, gaffed a show for Jim once so that I could see what was going on, and then he slowly began using me to substitute for him on shows where he was double booked and he couldn't be there. He would kind of help me through the design process until I kind of had a firm grasp on my own. So I was doing studio shows as well as rock shows, really starting to understand how the camera works. And that's kind of what it's all about. So at that point I saw, okay, this is something that I can do almost as a parallel career to working with Bruce and working with a few of the other rock bands that I was doing.
Well, it seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah. Well, and I love that idea of the live show being turned into something that could be consumed by TV viewers. So, and then at one point it just sort of like turned around. I still have a couple of rock things, but I would say 90% of my year is doing television style things.
Yeah, and sports was just sort of a natural extension of that.
I'm sorry, what sports are we talking about?
Well, like Super Bowl, the sporting events that you've been involved in lighting for television as well.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. I haven't actually lit a sports event, but I have, although I did one that I'll mention, but yes, that was just the first Super Bowl that I was involved with was produced by the Disney people that I knew from several shows that I had done at Disney World. Yeah. And so I went up against, several other designers in a bid process and was selected. So that was an exciting thing to be a part of because it was so enormous and outdoors. dealing with, a kind of a transition from daylight to nighttime in an enormous stadium where you had to set up in a 12-minute commercial.
Yeah. And I seem to recall that was Miami.
That was Miami. That was Joe Robbie Stadium.
I was there because that was the first time that we put those robo-scans onto something, and it was a nightmare.
That's right. Well, it was certainly a big show. I think I was probably in a little over my head as well, but we had a couple of technical snafus that
did. Yeah, we did. Yeah,
and it was a big enough show that we really couldn't afford to lose many of the lights that we had. My recollection is that by showtime, everything was back where it needed to be.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't easy. I had a lot of guys that didn't sleep for a few days, and we had to bring some guys in from Denmark. I don't know if you remember, but we brought in Finn, who was the head engineer for Martin in Denmark.
I remember.
And yeah, I mean, it was just, that was one of the hardest weeks, I think, of my life, because it went from, excited as hell, oh my God, we got lights that are going to be on the halftime show for the Super Bowl, to, could this week just be over already? Please just survive and get through it.
But, anything like that, and there had not been that many Super Bowls that had turned off the lights. Most of the Super Bowls prior to that just had supplemental fill lighting, and it was marching bands and so forth. And so I don't know whether that many companies had all the infrastructure.
Right. No, they didn't
handle that. And it was the 12-minute thing.
Yeah. Well, and now it's so much easier because you have, IP-rated lights, and we've all done it 1,000 times now. And, I remember one of the things was you guys were programming, and we had lights all over the field, and all of a sudden the sprinklers came on.
Yes, that's right.
And these were not IP-rated lights. And I think one of our techs, mistakenly yelled at one of the NFL, green guys. Yeah. And that was like a no-no, because those guys are God when it comes to the Super Bowl. It's like, you don't mess with our field. This is our field, and this is sacred. And so it was like, okay, better put, garbage bags over the lights or whatever, because this is bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah.
I came away from it with, lots of notes on how I would do it if I ever had the opportunity again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by the way, quite possibly the worst lip syncing I think I've ever heard was Patti LaBelle. It was so bad. It was like not even believable. It was just like, what are you doing? Like, she's singing different words and stuff.
Well, I guess it's been enough years since then that I could tell this story. But, audio-wise, Tony Bennett and Patti LaBelle were on the show. Tony Bennett insisted on singing live.
Yeah.
And Patti LaBelle insisted on pre-recorded track that she would lip sync. Well, Patti LaBelle couldn't remember her words, so she wasn't lip syncing to the track, even though the track continued. Tony Bennett forgot the words to his song, so he was standing there with a live mic and nothing coming out at all.
Yeah, I know. It was funny.
We had so many things that didn't work.
Yeah.
On that,
it was tough. It was tough. But there was one cool moment. So I think for one of the nights where you guys were programming or something, maybe the night before the Super Bowl or 2 nights before, I was there just checking on my guys, and I was taking my father-in-law and my ex-wife out for dinner, and so they were with me. I think my ex-wife might have stayed in the car, but my father-in-law wanted to come in with me and just see what it looked like. He's a big Super Bowl guy. And so he's like, Marcel, he's pulling on my shirt, and I think I'm talking to one of your guys or something, and he's pulling on my shirt, Marcel. And I go, yes, Tom, what? And he goes, that's Tony Bennett over there. And he was sitting in a golf cart just by himself, nobody around him or anything, right?
Yeah.
And I go, well, go say hello. He's like, no, I can't do that. And he's old school Chicago, my father-in-law, right? Old school. Like he grew up seeing Tony Bennett in bars in Chicago and stuff, right? And I can't. I'm like, he's sitting there by himself. Go say hi. He ends up talking to him for like 30 minutes. I swear, I could have murdered his wife or his daughter at that point, and he wouldn't have cared. He would have been like, "Oh, I'll look away," because he was just in heaven. He'd never met somebody like that before, so it was just such a moment for him.
Pretty cool.
It was about the only cool moment for me the whole week.
Yeah, it was stressful for everybody.
Yeah, it was a stressful week. Sorry to remind you of that one.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
So, of course, we lost Mr. Moody, I think last year or 2023,
yes.
maybe.
Yeah, it was in 2024.
Oh,
no,
okay,
excuse me, 2023.
Yeah. Well, they all blur. Ever since COVID, it's like this one blob of time since COVID.
Truly.
But yeah, it's obviously sad losing anybody right now, and we're losing way too many people. But Jim Moody was a big one. So Moody Ravitz ended in 97, 96.
Well, it really just, extended itself into Moody Ravitz Hollingsworth.
Right.
So we felt that adding the architectural component to our practice was going to be something that would round us out, fill in a whole sector that we weren't really taking advantage of. I was really interested in it. I had gone back to school and taken a bunch of classes in architectural lighting, and I was hot to do it. And some of my clients were hiring me to do, houses or restaurants that they owned. And so I thought I knew what I was doing. But I had a friend from my Chicago days who is now living in L.A., Dawn Hollingsworth, who was a bona fide architectural lighting designer. And so we managed to get her to join us and did that for a few years. Really trying to grow the architectural side of things, it
was an interesting period of time too, because it was sort of when like this architainment thing started, when so many, like especially corporate things were adding automated lighting or color change technology or whatever into their retail environments or into their sometimes even conference rooms and offices and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But bridges were starting to be lit and all kinds of things. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And LEDs were just beginning to rear their heads, so that there was color changing possible without a whole lot of external technology on them.
Yeah.
It was a good time to be getting into that. We had one client, GameWorks, which was like a big nightclub, restaurant, gaming chain. That was really good for us, and it was exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then moving along, we saw a friend of ours, Lisa Passamonte Green, who was kind of a competitor in the architectural lighting side, but she also had a firm grip on the theme park end, and she was suddenly left without her staff, who had gone off and began working with somebody else, and we were lending her staff. At this point, we had 15 or 20 people in our office, and we thought, Lisa, why don't you just join us, and then you can have a little bit of safety in the entertainment side and so forth, kind of protecting the overall enterprise. And
Makes
so
sense.
she did, and so that was when we decided we couldn't add another name to the list. So we called it Visual Terrain.
Ah, yeah. I remember that change. So was that set up like a collective or like a partnership, or what was sort of the company structure?
It was a partnership, and we were all kind of in charge of our own little sector, but we spilled over. I could do architectural work. Anybody could do anything they wanted to, but the partners brought in the work, and our compensation was more or less tied to the clients and the income that we were able to bring in. But as a collective, we were paying the salaries of everyone and the rent
office.
and anything else that we needed in order to run the business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I did that for, between 91 when I started with Jim and 2010 when I left. So there was like 20 years. of doing that. And I just decided I wanted to concentrate on the TV side. I didn't really want any of the other corporate responsibilities that, that I had, and, sharing expenses with all the other sectors as well. I just really wanted a few years, the kind of the fourth quarter of my career, to run things on a slightly simpler level. So I did that. I brought one employee with me, and just kept it, lean and mean.
Yeah. And that's you today still. So you're
today. That one employee left for Disney about 5 years into the process, and so right now I'm doing it entirely on my own. If I need support help, I just hire people in by the job, which is a much simpler way for me to operate.
Yeah,
and I'm happy doing it the way I.
Well, and you're not in a growth mode. Like, you're not out there trying to fight everybody to bring in every account you can and stuff. So you don't need a bunch of employees.
Right. Right.
So it makes a lot of sense what you've done and what you're doing, and I like it. I like it a lot. So, one of the things that you would know better than so many people is just the general evolution of lighting for TV, for music on TV, for live events on TV. And I mean, obviously cameras, obviously going from, stationary lights to moving lights, and going from moving lights to better moving lights, and better moving lights to LEDs. But aside from that, like, as far as the style of lighting and the skill set involved and all of that, has that evolved as well?
Well, absolutely. I think that since the 90s, when this really began, till the present day, I think that the lighting has gotten a lot more cinematic. I think that the lighting designers and the lighting consultants, the TV lighting consultants, are much more tied into a cinematic kind of look, and the cameras allow us to do that in order to make things look a lot more interesting and not quite so bland as they might have been in the 90s, when the cameras needed that much more light. And I think the style was, a lot of the directors of photography that would work on rock videos were from the commercial world, where everything is, was in those days, fairly flat, fairly even, to, these days when everybody is looking at the most interesting cinematography and wanting to transfer that to a rock show when it's appropriate. So I think in that respect, and that's something that, kind of speaks to me as well. So when I speak to students, I try to, help them understand it's not about a traditional look anymore. I was just attending a webinar the other day with a cinematographer, and somebody posed a question about soft light, and what is soft light an ineffective way, an uninteresting way to light people in today's day and age. And the DP said, and I totally agreed with him, it's all about where the light comes from, how you control the light, how you control the shadows. I talk an awful lot about shadow management, when I teach students. And so I think understanding that, developing your eye, I think that's really what's come a long way since the early days. It's no longer just a matter of, is there enough light, but how do you use light?
Yeah. What about AI? Is AI having any impact yet on lighting for television? Like, is AI doing any of the analysis on how much light, how little light, how things are going to need to be done, or is that all still done by the lighting designer and you?
Well, I'd be curious to know if anybody else is using it that way. I'm not. I haven't really seen the tools yet. I know Vectorworks has some tools that will allow a set designer to say, okay, do this set in a modern way, do this in an Italian, Renaissance way, and the AI will simply just change it all, and suddenly it's a new look. I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of computerization when you think of what we can do with previs these days, but I haven't really seen anything that does either calculations or design itself.
Yeah. Are you using AI at all yet? Like for any kind of even just, fixture mapping or writing or anything?
I've begun using AI for a little bit for writing. I try not to rely on it, but sometimes I just want to think of something, a different way, and I'll see what AI. And I've just really started doing this.
Yeah.
I've been, playing around with it for a little while and trying to understand what it can do. So I'm fascinated by it. I'm going to get more into it. I am completely in favor of it. I don't want it to replace people, but I think if it's used properly, it won't. It'll just make us all better.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an aspect of that where it does make us all better. But I do think that ultimately it's going to replace many, many, many things, and how that happens and how eloquent it is or how rough it is when that happens, we'll see. I just think it's another, as big as it is, because I think this is probably the biggest technological shift that man has witnessed since the beginning of time. Maybe fire would be the other one, but I think that this is that impactful, and it's going to be a wait and see kind of thing. It depends on so many people doing the right things, all these trillion-dollar companies thinking in our best interests and stuff, and that doesn't always work. And but I see a lot of opportunities for it to simplify and streamline a lot of jobs. When I think of the lines of code that you have to write to program an MA3 console these days, some of it is just not work that an LD who's been being paid a lot of money should be sitting there doing. Like, I mean, that's stuff that AI can take, and that's where I use it the most. Is like sometimes somebody will send me a document that's 10 pages of a lot of the same fluff, and I'll just feed it into something and say, explain this to me like I'm a sixth grader. Not just summarize it, but sometimes it's explain this to me like I'm an idiot, and because I am, and you get really great results from stuff like that. Like it does a very, very good job with stuff like that. Sometimes I just say, hey, take all this information and put it into an 8x4 table with this and this and this, and boom, all of the information is laid out exactly how you want it. And it's just like, I'm very visual, so a lot of those types of tools help me a lot. But
I agree. I've done that too. I've recently had to read some legal documents, and some of it was just, gibberish to me. And it's amazing how AI can just, break it down, give you examples. So, as long as you can trust it, you don't want AI to say, I think we should launch the nuclear missile.
That's a great example because, it will at some point, like at some point, I think we'll all be guided by AI to a certain extent in our decision-making process, whether that's driving or whether that's flying an airplane or whether that's, the guy in charge of the nuclear button or, whatever it is.
Or medical analysis. That's a big one.
Well, but that's one that I'm super in favor of. Like, I've had friends who have done these robotic surgeries for like pancreatic cancer and stuff like that very successfully. And so if you ask me, do I want surgery performed by a robot or by a human, I'll pick a robot every time because humans make mistakes, robots don't. As long as they're programmed properly, and you would think that they are by now. I think medical AI is going to be probably one of the most exciting and incredible areas of AI in the next 5 or 6 years. Like I predict, a cure to cancer, Alzheimer's, all kinds of really, really big things that have been plaguing us for many, many years, and with no real success as far as cures or even, pathways to cures. So because of the ability to research, like that's where AI comes in so effectively and efficiently, is in research. It can, like, let's say you have to go research a project because you're lighting a 15th century act or something, whatever it is, and you need to do research on that period. AI can do in 10 minutes what you could do in 2 weeks. Yeah. So that's the incredible thing. That's what I love about it so much. But yeah, I mean, it's coming. It's just going to be interesting. Like, I think for now, there are commercial roadblocks that are keeping companies like MA Lighting from putting AI in consoles. I think that there's going to be, sort of a slow move into that, and then all of a sudden everybody all at once. Because once somebody sort of cracks the seal open and says, "Hey, look," because right now designers are going to fight it. Especially people who earn their living programming consoles are going to fight it, and so they should. I mean, you don't want your rates to go down or to lose days or anything because AI is doing it instead of you.
Right, exactly. But I mean, can you then just say to the MA, give me a Stones cue?
Yeah, that's the other thing is the whole copyright and who owns the IP of all of this stuff, but that's the other problem. And you can, like, I use the music one quite often, or one of the music ones called Suno. And in Suno, you can say, I want something kind of jazzy, but a little bit Earth, Wind, Fire, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Boom, you get that style. Now, they're not copying songs, but they're certainly pulling some of that styling into it,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and Suno, the music one, their new, the iPhone app anyways, I don't know if it does it on the Android one, but the iPhone app, you can hum a few notes into it or a few bars into it and then say, now create a reggae song around that little melody that I just gave you, and make it in, whatever beats per minute and in this style with this type of a singer. And you've got the song. I mean, it's just incredible how...
Yeah. I mean, as much fun as that is, and I guess it gives us, gives the world more variety of music. Does it, take something away from...
Of course it does.
Hey, now we don't need humans to do that.
Yeah, no, of course it does. Of course it does. Like, it's... Yeah, so that's some of the stuff where I wonder where it's all going to go, because, of course, musicians are going to push back on all of that stuff, but our audiences, like, I don't know where it all goes. And then if audiences accept AI music, well, what happens to live music now? Because there's such a massive need for and passion and desire for live music right now, and market for it. If music is suddenly AI robots, you're not going to have, unless it's just a big video screen with cool visuals and you're listening to music in a crowd with a video screen, like, that sounds awfully boring to me. So,
well, I'll tell you, in 100 years, they're going to be listening to this podcast and probably laughing at us for knowing so little about what
you idiots.
It's going to be commonplace in 100 years.
Well, by the way, it wouldn't be the first time I screwed up a prediction, because, COVID, I created a phrase called Day 91. I said, this is going to be a 90-day problem. And what do you want your business to look like in Day 91? And, people threw that at me for about the next 380 days or something. It's like, yeah, Day 91, huh?
Yeah. Well, you just said it out loud. I think everyone else thought it was just going to be a 90-day thing, too.
Yeah, well, I say everything out loud that most people just think and keep quietly because they're smart enough not to say it.
Yes.
So Showlight, tell me about Showlight. Showlight, from what I understand, is sort of a get together of these really great minds of the lighting business.
Yes, it was started, maybe 25 years ago by some Brits, and they do it once every 4 years. Okay. It's kind of a convocation in a different city, They've been to several cities in Europe. They did one in New York, but I think they much prefer doing it in Europe.
Yeah.
And they get people, sort of like a TED talk for lighting designers. The format is three lighting designers are on stage, each give a 20-minute presentation with or without visual, but most have some sort of visual support. Then those three speakers stay on stage and they take questions for about a half an hour. And this happens, and then there's a break for food, and there's some manufacturers that have tables that you can visit, and then you go back and you do it again. So they bring lighting designers from all walks of lighting design and try to get as many different, they call them presenting a paper, but, it's a presentation on so many different things. So it's been directors of photography. It's been theatrical lighting designers that have done in big Broadway musicals, but in a diner. Rock and roll people, BBC lighting directors, et cetera, et cetera. Less architectural, but there's a little bit of that. And somebody from the architectural world wanted to propose a paper. They very well could be accepted. So it's 3 days of this. At the end of every day, the first day, everybody's matched up with a manufacturer and they take you out to a fabulous dinner somewhere in the city that you're in. So far, the ones that I've been to have been outside Prague in a little village about 2 hours out in the Czech Republic mountains. And I went to one in Florence, Italy, which was great. They took a long break because of the pandemic. And so they're just doing a new one this year in Dijon, France, a couple hours outside of Paris. And so I'm going. And so, and then one of the 3 nights, there's a big gala reception where everybody gets together and people give a few speeches, and you are encouraged to change your location from table to table to speak to certain people. Like if your napkin has a certain color sticker on the bottom of it, you're the one who is chosen when they ring the bell to go to another table. So everybody gets to talk to everyone else. There are a lot of lighting celebrities there, Broadway people, rock and roll people, TV, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a learning experience. It's fun. You get to go to a really interesting city. They break early one day and take you on a tour of the city.
That's
and
cool.
So it's just really
And
a good time.
so who runs it? Is it like a not-for-profit or something?
Yeah, there was a show light committee that was based in the UK, and a few of the founders retired or passed on in the last few years. So there's a new group of people, but it's mostly a consortium of 5 or 6 organizers that are based mostly in the UK, a little bit in the US. And people just put it all together from a finding the venue standpoint to selecting all of the people that do the presentations. And so you can imagine.
So
just
you
like
get selected every year. You're getting, or not every year, but you're getting selected. You don't just raise your hand and say, I want to come.
No, you have to buy a ticket. Yeah. So you can go to their website, which is, I think, Showlight.
No, but I'm saying you. I'm saying you. You, Jeff Ravitz.
I was invited to do a presentation last time. This time I decided that I didn't have anything really new to contribute more than I did last time. So
you're going just as an audience.
I'm just going as an audience member.
You're a punter.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
But
is it mostly students and stuff who are in the audience, or
no?
Working
there
professionals?
There are some students, but it really runs the full spectrum of student to geezer.
Huh. And how many people are in the audience?
300 or 400.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'd say probably closer to 300. I mean, all the manufacturers, all the kingpins of the manufacturing, companies. It's always sponsored by one of the big manufacturers. So this year, I believe it's being sponsored by Juilliard because they're in France.
Yeah.
And when we were in the Czech Republic, it was Robe, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And then Clay Packy when we were in Italy.
Cool.
So that they sort of inject the flavor of their own style and their company into the overall event. But all the others are there as well.
Interesting.
And then the little lobby manufacturers tables are much more intimate than you would get at LDI, which is so much busier. So you have good one-on-one time. You're only out there for about 20 minutes, and then you're back inside the auditorium for another set of presentations after they have plied you with food and drink during the break.
Yeah. It sounds fun. I'm going to have to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not this
in May.
one. Yeah.
Go to showlight.org and give it a try. Yeah, it's just a trip to Dijon, France, but wow, it's fun.
It sounds amazing. And the other thing that I wanted to get to before we leave, because we're getting pretty long in the tooth here, you and me talkers. So I know that you've been big on helping people not only through education, where you've been extremely giving of your time. You're always involved in these things where you're either speaking or you're teaching somewhere or something. So it doesn't shock me that you're going to Show Light, because it's another one of those types of events. But I know you also get involved in more structured charities and things too, right?
Yes. And there are a couple that I really love. Feeding America is a national organized food bank that has contributed a lot to all of the United States-based disasters over many years. They were very instrumental in helping out, along with World Central Kitchen and so forth, when we had the recent wildfires here in Los Angeles that were so devastating. So I'm a big fan of theirs. And then the LA Food Bank, which does things on a much more local level here in Los Angeles for the many homeless people that, really benefit greatly from their generosity and outreach. And then there's also the North Hollywood Food Bank that I occasionally go in and do some cooking for.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Good for you.
Yeah. So
I for a couple of years when my son was really young, I used to take him and my business partner at the time and his two kids, and we'd throw them in the back of the pickup truck, and we'd go to one of the churches would make turkey dinners in a box, and we'd go load up with 200-300 of these turkey dinners in the back of the truck. And the kids would just jump out and go door to door and hand out all these turkey dinners. And we'd drive around, I don't know what you call them, but less advantaged neighborhoods or whatever. And, they'd just knock on the door and say, hey, do you want Thanksgiving dinner? And they'd be like, oh, my God, yes. And, they'd and I loved it. I always said, I want to get way more involved in this stuff. And then life grabs you and you get busy. And
of course. But, I say if everybody does it when they can, then we've got it much more covered. And, food insecurity is just heartbreaking in this country where so many have so much and so many don't, that, I think we can even the score a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's Tony Robbins, I think, gets a bad rap from a lot of people in our industry because supposedly he walks away without fully paying the bill occasionally. But he's done so much for feeding, people. Like I can't remember what number he's at now, but something like 100 million meals. He's got this mission to hand out 1 billion meals, and he's over 100 million or something. And I'm probably way off on all these numbers, but it's just an enormous number that you're going really, that many? And so he's constantly collecting money from his billionaire friends and stuff to pay for this stuff. And it's hard to believe, like you said, in as much money as there is flying around right now, it's hard to believe that people are starving.
that people don't know where they're getting their next meal from. So
yeah. And how awful is that?
yeah, it's always an incredibly important thing. So thank you for being so charitable and taking care of some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking about it.
We're at 2 hours, so I think we got to go. But I appreciate you so much, Jeff. I could sit and talk to you and listen to you for hours on end. I think you're one of the nicer people in our industry. I'm super glad to have you as a friend and to be able to talk to you occasionally, and love seeing you at trade shows and stuff. And I'm just glad you're still working, and you're not like, we don't have to set up a GoFundMe for Jeff Ravitz. That would suck.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Marcel. I mean, you're great to talk to as well, and a really great interviewer. I enjoyed this a lot, and I've enjoyed all your other podcasts as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We're going to have to do it again, though, because we didn't even talk about Morpheus. And you've been the most loyal Morpheus user of any Morpheus user, I think, ever. And so, that's a whole story unto itself. So we'll save it for the next one.
Cool.
So thank you. And you have a great rest of your week.
You too.
All right,
Thanks, Marcel. Be well.
All right. See ya.